Hello everyone and welcome to Edison TV. My name is Joep van Beurden and I'm a Director Benelux at Edison Group. This interview is with Kendrion, the Dutch specialist in actuators. My guests of today are CEO Joep van Beurden and CFO Jeroen Hemmen. Welcome, gentlemen. To start off with my first question, where does Kendrion stand in the global market for actuators?
Yeah, thank you, Johan. So Kendrion in that market for global smart actuators is active in two main domains, industrial and automotive. To give a bit of context, the combined group for 2022 is expected to generate just over €500 million in revenue. Now, within these two domains, industrial represents just more than half of that, say 52-53% of that revenue. And here we're active in a number of domains. The most important one is brakes for electromotors, and think about applications like electromotors and therefore the brakes applied on top of that for applications like robotics, wind power, and intralogistics. But we also make actuators for flow control applications in medical devices, actuators for all sorts of industrial locks. So these are more safety related applications. And we also produce the electronics to control these devices. Now in automotive, where there's a big change and disruption going on, there is lots of opportunity in actuators related to electrified cars. Here we're, for instance, developing sound actuations to make sure that electrified vehicles create the sound that is legally obliged to protect cyclists and pedestrians, because these cars are so silent without that sound actuator, but also valves for smart shock absorbers and control valves for sensor cleaning. Now, so there's a whole range of different applications within industrial and automotive. Combined, our estimate is that our market share is between 15 and 20%. But I would say generically, when we are active in a certain application domain, we are one of the leaders. So either the clear leader, number one, but at a minimum in the top three.
Thank you for this introduction. We all know that the market conditions have been difficult and still are very challenging. What are the highlights of 2022 so far for Kendrion?
Yeah, Johan, I want to point out three highlights here. So first of all, we have been able to substantially grow our revenue. In the first half year, our consolidated revenue increased with 7%, despite quite challenging market circumstances that especially impacted our automotive franchise with lower car production, significantly lower car production globally and in Europe. Secondly, we successfully protected our added value margin. The added value margin in the first half year was stable, even increasing a little bit, despite raw material prices increasing with on average around 10%. And the third highlight here to mention is the performance of our industrial groups. So both our industrial groups continued the strong performance that we also saw last year and the year before. We continue to grow our revenue, top line, and also our profitability. The top line increased 17%, and in the first half year, we also achieved 17.9% EBITDA margin in our industrial franchise.
And despite a difficult market challenging where we just talked about, you already said it, the industrial division is performing extremely well. What are the drivers for this success?
Yeah, indeed, as Jeroen just mentioned, so good top line and bottom line growth, 17% in the first half at a profitability EBITDA level of 17.9. So if you look at industrial, I mentioned this earlier. So we're active, for instance, in brakes, industrial brakes, and these brakes are mostly applied in combination with an electromotor. Now, if you think about an electromotor, you think about electrification, you can understand there's a broad trend in society towards more electrified applications, not just in automotive, but also in all sorts of industrial applications. Things like robotics, like wind power, so the big windmills that you see everywhere, itself, but also intralogistics, for instance. Every one of these electromotors needs an industrial brakes, and this is where we have a very strong position, number one or number two, with a full range of brakes available. And the underlying trend of electrification is fueling this strong growth. And you can imagine that I mean, from our perspective, and I think many will agree with me, this trend has just begun, and electrification is here to stay for at least 5, 10, maybe probably much longer. So we are expecting a sustained underlying organic growth opportunities for these brakes. Now, in other segments, in industrial actuators and controls, we have similar applications. I mentioned earlier locks for safety applications. We're also there active for actuators that have to do with energy transportation. So also there, the transition towards cleaner forms of energy is fueling the opportunity in industrial.
And now we move to a question about automotive. At your recent Capital Markets Day, Kendrion announced that as of 2023, the automotive division will be split into automotive core and automotive E. What are the reasons for this?
Yes, in automotive, as we all know, there is a massive disruption going on, and here I talk about the transition from the traditional combustion engine, of course, that we all know very well, to electrified and connected cars, both 100% electrified, but also hybridized. And this really means that you can see a bifurcation in the market, where on the one hand, when you look at the traditional combustion engine actuators that we have been producing for a long time, you see that this market is, although still, you know, at least 80% of the volume is no longer growing, and from the OEM's perspective, the investment in these types of technologies has dried up. The flip side of this is when you look at electrification, there is an enormous development and there's enormous growth opportunity, and there is an opportunity for these new actuators that we talked about, like valves for smart shock absorber systems, sound actuation, and sensor cleaning. This market, if you look at the volume of passenger cars, of electrified passenger cars, is expected to grow with at least 40% year over year for the next 5 to 10 years. So the characteristics between these two, say, sub-segments in passenger cars is quite substantial. So this is the reason why we have decided to say, look, on the combustion engine, where we talk about these actuators as our core, because today that is still the core of the revenue there. It's not about growth, but it is much more about cash flow, about profitability, and about basically managing a slow but steady decline while creating as much cash as you can. While on the other side of the house, in E, you see enormous growth opportunities, which means there the focus is on growth, the focus is on innovation, and the focus, of course, is investing in the relevant technologies for the future, while clearly at the same time protecting profitability. So these two different worlds we felt made sense for us strategically to say we're creating two independent organizations almost, of course, making use of the same manufacturing infrastructure, but with different KPIs and with different targets to adhere to. So that is the fundamental reason why we think a split between core and E makes sense.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, so both core and E, they will get their own P&L. So the management teams will be responsible for that P&L, but within that P&L, both will get a distinct set of KPIs. Core will obviously be measured on the generation of cash flow and profitability, protecting added value margin, while E will get a set of KPIs and will be measured around the total amount of new business wins and the achievement of profitable growth. As from the 1st of January, we will disclose externally, separately, the revenue contribution both from core and from E.
Thank you, Jeroen. And are you already talking about financials? Brings me to the final questions about the financial targets. At the Capital Markets Day in September, you maintained the targets for 2025, which were set 2 years ago.
Yes.
Can you please explain the revenue growth and EBITDA margin targets?
Yeah, certainly. So on revenue 2 years ago, more than 2 years ago, we said we want to grow on average organically with more than 5% per year from the revenue base of 2019. If you calculate that, then that would mean that by the year 2025, our revenue will be well above 625 million. We will do that. At the same time, we aspire a return on invested capital of at least 25%, excluding intangibles arising from acquisition from the capital base, achieving an EBITDA margin of at least 15%. Currently, we are at around 12%. The increase, 1.25% of the increase, is expected to come from cost measures that we expect on the one hand from optimizing our manufacturing footprint in Automotive Core, and on the other hand of further streamlining our organization in Automotive Core, as we have recently disclosed. And our final financial target is to pay out between 35% and 50% of our normalized net profits. And over the past 2 years, we have paid out around 50% of our normalized net profits.
Thank you both for this interview, which provided us very useful insights about Kendrion. Thank you, Joep van Beurden. Thank you, Jeroen Hemmen.